The StockX Sneaker Podcast. Until you pin me, you're not on the sneaker power list. Welcome to episode 79 of the StockX Sneaker Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at StockX and on Instagram as well. The rundown for the show today, I'll talk about a bunch of recent releases and my random thoughts on them. I'll also talk about sneaker news like Zadeh Kicks Pleading Guilty and recent Nike news where they had their quarterly results and also recent lawsuits that they've been facing. And I'll also talk about what happened to Air Max Day. Why don't they call it Air Max Day anymore? You know, sure, they still do Air Max events and they have some Air Max type of sneakers that come out, but it's not what it once was. So I examine why that is. I also talk about the StockX Verified Seller program and how are they vetting and auditing this program? Is there a StockX strike team that's going to bust down your door and demand to see your A6 1130s? And I'll talk about Bodega's downfall, apparently, how they fired staff and closing stores and looking to regroup. And I look into if they should be saved. Are they even worth saving? That leads me into the main topic, which is about how do you keep your brand fresh? How do you keep your brand from not going stale? And this includes stores like Bodega and collaborators and the need to stay relevant. And I revisit my theory about how a persona-based brand is more important than ever was. And I specifically look into recent releases from UnheardOf and their Adidas drops, but could easily replace UnheardOf in this case study with John Geiger or JaeTips, for example. So there's a lot in this episode. I hope you enjoy. If you see me on Twitter plugging old episodes, that's just me trying to reach a new audience. Obviously everyone loves to grow and build, and I do too. And so when things like retail stuff happens, and I call that exact same thing in the Future of Sneaker Retail podcast episode, I'll post about it and I'll post a link to that episode. Or when Zadeh Kicks is found guilty of basically having a Ponzi scheme, I'll talk about, hey, I called this in an episode where I explained his whole scheme and even say that this could be a Ponzi scheme. And so I link it because it's informative and you can be informed of things before they actually happened. I might not get credit from other publications or other podcasts or news places about this kind of stuff, but that's all right. I've accepted that already. So this is why I'm asking the audience to help me share the word, help me inform other people. So that's why I'm looking to these old episodes and trying to show people that there's value in listening to the StockX Sneaker Podcast. So if you're a longtime listener, please, by all means, retweet those types of posts when I make them, or more importantly, tell someone you know to check out this podcast if they haven't already. Word of mouth is basically the lifeblood of independent creators, independent podcasters. All I have is my listeners. All I have are the people who follow my takes on Twitter or Instagram. And, I'm not an industry person, as I've talked about in the past. Sure, I've had some perks here and there, and that's almost always because of friends I've made. But I'm not an influencer. No one's looking to be influenced by a 47-year-old man who lives in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And no one's going to fly me out to family events. I'm not a collab cousin or going to be on a sneaker power list. And all due respect to all those people, I'm not saying I'm jealous of any of that stuff. I'm just saying I'm in my own lane over here and I'm trying to show the worth of my lane. So, I do try to take a lighter approach to things. I think sneakers should be fun. On the other hand, I might take a harsher approach to other things because I'm not getting an Air Max D8 that I have to pretend to like. And I can say whatever I want about the Air Max D8 or any other event or product and things like that. So that's my pitch. People usually ask on podcasts, please like and subscribe and leave a review. I'm asking for you to share the podcast with someone you think that would like to listen to it, would like to be informed on sneaker stuff before it happens. And yes, I know I have some barriers. I know my voice can be boring. I know it might sound like NPR, but I don't give a shit. I still do it anyways. I still get up to this mic and record it anyways. And that's just how creators have to be. But anyways, let's get on with the show. On feet, I've been wearing the Concepts New Balance 740. I think I've been just calling them the Champagne Sludge sneaker. Rosé de Salehe. I'm not sure if my French is close or totally off there, but this was the first Concept 740 that came out. The one that is like light green and light pink, not the Brute one that is like green and dark black or something. I've been wearing these as a beater. It's a very comfortable shoe, as you would expect from New Balance. And this was the cheaper shoe that was at 120 or so. And you could tell that there's cheaper materials on it. There's more mesh and synthetic materials on it. And there's lots of like overlays of that synthetic material. And even after wearing a couple times, I see like one of the panels is like slightly popped off on the left side of one of my sneakers. And so that's fine. It's supposed to be a beater. It's still comfortable. Insole as well too. And I find it really comfortable as well too on this New Balance. Rosé de Sagné. Sounds Frenchy enough. Champagne Sludge works as well too. For pickups, I did pick up the Jordan 4 Brick by Brick Nigel Sylvester, or as I like to call them, the Tandoori Chicken 4s. And if you can't tell by how I pronounce Tandoori Chicken, I am Punjabi, so that's why I call them that. It's the closest anyone has ever gotten to recognizing my culture in a sneaker. And it's not even called that. It's just me calling that. Anyways, I somehow won the sneakers app draw, the US sneakers app draw on this. I wasn't even expecting that at all. If you've listened to this podcast on pickups, I always say my account is flagged. So I'm not sure exactly what happened, if the flag is cleared or it really was just random that I won. So the drops are 7 a.m. on the West Coast. And that day I woke up a little bit before that and I was just reading Twitter in bed, get ready with me, morning routine. Wake up, go to the bathroom, get back in bed, read in Twitter for about 45 minutes, and don't play any videos with sound because I don't want to wake up my wife. That's a more accurate wake up routine. So the day these released, the night before, is when I actually posted my last sneaker podcast episode. And I usually record at midnight and 1 a.m. or so. So that's around the time I finished at 1 a.m. Pacific time. And so I usually don't tweet about the new episode until the morning then. And so the next morning I woke up and I was just wanting to tweet out my podcast episode. So I had the draft of the text that I was going to write ready to go. And I posted it at like 7:08 a.m. Pacific time, which is like 11:08 Eastern time. And friend of the show, Garrett G, he replied to me basically saying, "Hey, Sock, not now. This sneakers draw is my last hope." And I was like, "Oh, what sneakers draw?" And I totally forgot that this Nigel drop was happening. And so with 2 minutes left, I was like, "Oh, well, let me go check it out and let me enter because, what's the harm? And even if my account is flagged, so what's the harm?" And so, as I've said, I haven't won anything on there in ages. And because my phone was still in do not disturb mode, I didn't even realize I won till like 10-15 minutes later. So of course I was glad to win. I was glad to see that my account is not flagged. I guess maybe not flagged temporarily. And thank you to Garrett G for reminding me to enter the draw as well too. But there's a problem for me. There's a hitch with this. And I still don't know for sure if I can bring sneakers across the border. That's because the Canadian border agents that when you come back are still implementing a 25% tariff potentially against American goods. And so I'm still not sure if Jordan 4 is considered an American good or if it's origin of country. As I tried to explain last time, when I go across the border, I declare everything. I have 2 sneakers. The total is $305. And most of the time they just say thank you and let me go. But now they're being a little bit more strict. And so since then, I haven't really brought anything back. So, I don't want to go inside and have to pay tax and duties and a 25% tariff on this. That'd be like an extra 125 US or so that I'd be paying. So my dilemma was, should I just sell this sneaker on the apps and right when I go to my mailbox to pick it up, just slap the label and send it right off? Or do I bring it across the border and just keep it? Because normally, I don't come on here and say I sold a sneaker right away. I just hold every good sneaker. That's been my policy forever. And so this time I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sell it. I don't have to think about it. And even selling it, the price on the sneaker, it might go up in the future. It's in the $550, $580 range right now, in a size 12 that is. And in the future, could it go up to $650 to $800? Maybe, or it just forever hovers in this $550 range. Whatever it is, I'm not a prognosticator on resale prices. I'm sure someone on Twitter is posting all about this day to day right now, but I'll leave that up to them. So I sold a sneaker. Forgive me for selling a good sneaker. I usually don't sell good sneakers, but what can I do? I blame Donald Trump for me not having the tandoori chicken fours. I also picked up the Kith New Balance 997.5 Easter. That was a Kith strike, and as I joked on Twitter, another sign that sneakers are back, that Kith strikes are back. And this was like a code based 1 day only where you had to get the codes from either Ronnie's friends or their employees or just friends of the brand. People like Arab Lincoln and JLP and my buddy Cran had a code as well too. And so I wanted to support my buddy Cran. I bought these. His photos on it look great, so I wanted to support and don't have shipping on those, don't have them in hand or anything. And those are at least shipping from Kith Canada to me, so I'm glad to be not thinking about duties and tariffs and all that kind of stuff for once. And it was definitely interesting release strategy. We've seen code-based stuff before with like hard copy, but I'd never seen a drop like this where not even like Ronnie or the official Kith accounts posted any information about it. It was just friends of the brand posted about it, and they are the ones who had their specific codes, and they were the ones who communicating the 24 hours only stuff. So I hope it went well for them because it's interesting to see some sort of different strategy, and especially one where it was easy enough to get. I also picked up the Kobe 6 Dodgers from the Undefeated online raffle. Shout out to EQL or Equal, as I'm supposed to say. And I also picked up the Action Bronson 990 V6 that he recently released as well too on his site. And both those releases, it seemed like a lot of people want. So if you were trying to get that sneaker, there's a pretty good chance you were able to get it. I know not everyone was able to get it, but I saw a lot of wins on the timeline, and those are two for me. I don't have them in hand yet, so again, I have to figure out if I'm going to bring them across the border and pay the tariffs, if there are tariffs, all that kind of stuff. But I'm excited to get those in hand. That's my first Kobe win since like I think the Grinch. I didn't get any of the other Kobe 6s since then. And the Action Bronson 990 V6, that was my favorite sneaker a few years ago, so I'm sure I'll be wearing this one a lot as well too. For misses, I missed out on the Jordan 4 SB Navy, and there you go. There's proof to the one person who messaged me and saying, hey, how come you hit every single sneaker? There's proof I do not hit every single sneaker. Really, I do one podcast a month, and so sometimes stuff is compressed into one podcast, and it might just feel like that. Other times it is, I'm on a little bit of a roll, and so it does feel like that, but there's definitely times where it's a bit more of a dry spell. And so missed out on this one, but that's all right. I still have the pine green one, which I wore exactly one time. So I should just bust that one out instead. For skips, I was thinking about rebranding the skips part into just recent releases. And that's because all the stuff I'm skipping is mostly because I don't want to be buying a sneaker every 3 days, but I still like the sneaker. So most of the time I do like the sneaker. I have nothing against the sneakers that I say that I'm skipping. It's usually just because there's way too many sneakers that are good out there and you can't buy them all. And it's always meant to be an excuse to talk about recent releases, so why not just call it recent releases? And so a recent one was the Supreme Air Max 1 drop that happened, and I was thinking that this used to be an auto cop for me. I would just buy any Nike Supreme sneaker. I bought the last few all white ones even, like the Air Max 98 TL, I think it was. The Air Max Plus was all white one. I have that as well too. And both of those I still have. They're just sitting there. They're all white, and those are probably from the last like 2-3 years, and I never wore them. So maybe that was a sign for me to, maybe skip these Supreme Air Max 1. Just start skipping some of these Supreme drops. I also skipped out that New Balance 991 V2, the Salehe purple one. I was joking, we should call it Grimace Be the Shoe. And it's a nice shade of purple too, like that old 60s TV show Joker, the Cesar Romero Joker purple. But the issue with the 991 V2 is just so expensive. Its retail price is $275. And Kith had one as well too that was for their Osaka release, which had that classic steel blue colorway. I like the shoe. It's very nice. Retail is crazy, $275. For me, all in, it would have been like $420 Canadian or so, which comes out to like $300 US. My sneakerhead math is to say that is too much, but then to buy a whole bunch of shoes that are worth $200 and be like, that's totally fine. I also skipped out on this JaeTips sneaker, the new Saucony Jazz 9, I think it's called. First off, I want to say I saw this Saucony Run campaign where they had JaeTips on the poster for Saucony Run, and Shout out to Saucony for putting a fat guy on a running poster. I'm a fellow thick boy myself. Shout out to all the fat guys on running posters out there. Hey, I've run 10K before. I've run mini 10Ks before. That was, 10, 15 years ago, but I've definitely done it. So if JaeTips is the face of Saucony running, I hope it inspires people to go out there and run a 10K as well too. So when this sneaker was first teased with the photo and the campaign name of I love you, but I'm busy, I remember being like confused by the name at the time, because that is just something I would never say to anyone really. And so I was like, what does this sneaker mean? Is he saying this to his family? But when the official launch video was posted and it was time to do the official rollout of the sneaker, the video showed that it was actually the exact opposite, that he's not saying it to his family, that he skips the video shoot that he's doing for the sneaker to spend time with his kids. Sort of saying it to his employees then, in this case, in the video. And I think I saw in one of the clips that JaeTips posted where he's being interviewed by Billboard, where he's talking about it being, about the entrepreneur and finding a work-life balance and, sacrificing time when you got a lot of things going on. You're juggling a lot of things as an entrepreneur. And as I said before, this is just my opinion. I just don't think I'd ever use that phrase to anyone. I wouldn't say it to my family. I wouldn't say it to my kids. I wouldn't say it to my friends in exactly those words. You could express the same sentiment in other words, but I'm never using the words I love you, but. And if in the video it's implied that he's saying it to his employees, maybe that's not something you should be saying to employees either. It's sort of implied that you would only say it to a subordinate, because you wouldn't say it to like a peer, a coworker. And I'm just uncomfortable with the fact of your coworkers and your boss and your place of employment thinking of you as family. That's just not how it works anywhere. In the past, companies used to use terms like we are all a family, we treat you like family. But when it's layoff time, you are not family. You are a number. Sorry, family member, you gotta go. Even in smaller companies, if you're working in a tight-knit group, sure, you can care for the people that are around you. You can care for your boss. You can care for the work that you do. The boss can care a lot that the work that you do is really good, but they don't really love you. That's not love. That's capitalism. When you talk to your boss, if you go to your work and you talk to your boss, assume that the boss has it written on their forehead that I can fire you at any time, and then talk to them accordingly. So overall, this phrase just sounds very American to me. And, my audience is like 90% American. So maybe they didn't pick up on this. Maybe they are aware of it, but just the phrase, I love you, but I'm busy, seems very American to me. It's a very American sentiment to me. I don't think a Canadian would say it. There's a certain level of politeness or niceness around here, or just dancing around the subject and using different words. It's definitely not European at all. I don't think Foot Patrol or Star Cow Paris is going to have a campaign called I love you, but I'm busy. Only an American would do that. And essentially, that's what JaeTips is there for. He's an American collaborator. Give us you the American experience in a sneaker form. As someone with a sneaker podcast that only talks about sneakers on here, I really do talk about a lot of other things, just like I just did right there. Also recently released was the UnheardOf Adidas Adistar Cushion 3 Piggy Runners. That's the official long name of it. And these were the pink shoes that you've been seeing online from UnheardOf and Adidas, of which there were 1,500 pairs. And there was apparently a blue pair shock drop the day before as well too, for friends and family who went to the event. And I have some thoughts about the marketing rollout for this sneaker, which I'll bring up later in another segment. But for the release recap, the in-store release event seemed like it went well. It was in like a nice venue, a museum or something. The online release seemed like it was botched a bit. It was botted, I guess. And bots are smart enough to pick up like any new product that you put on at a certain time. And I guess that's probably what happened here. And they tweeted out a bunch of people who may have botted them, and tweeted out a bunch of names as well too. And my stance on that. I think it's a violation of privacy to do that, but they look like they were fake names. And so I don't know if Seymour Butts really did bot the site or not, or if it's just a fake name. But I guess those orders were canceled, and then they're tweeting out that they're going to look through supporters and try to invoice real people. And so overall, even though there were problems, it seems like real people will get these pairs, or are going to get the pairs from these canceled bot orders. But if you have a super fast sellout, if you have a botched drop, if you have bots buying your product, that's not exactly a bad thing for a retailer. That actually builds hype, that builds to your lore. And so even if you have to do a bunch of extra work afterwards to cancel those and get them in the hands of real people, that also adds to your lore. And, UnheardOf has been doing that. So I'm sure they'll build on it. I'm sure eventually, if it gets to a certain level, they will go EQL equal. But for now, they're out there brand building, which I'll talk about a little bit later on as well too. The Air Max 95 Neon is back too, and I bought a pair last time when they dropped in like 2021 or 2022 or so. And at that time, I bought them true to size and they did not fit. I had to go up a size in size 13. So I sold those size 12 that I got then. And so this time it's a big bubble. There's a higher heel, I guess. And I'm generally not a fan of a sneaker where the heel part is bigger than the front foot part. It feels like you're on a slight slope and it feels slightly comfortable to me. And it always feels like my toes are pushing into the top if it's like that. So the other part, I'm not sure if this big bubble makes it look like it's got this big fat ass. to quote Al Pacino from Heat, she got a great ass. That's what these look like to me. Maybe it's different in hand. I don't know. And the word is out there that they're very limited, rumored to be 10,000 pairs. Brendan Dunn of Complex has been the one saying this. And I guess he even said on a podcast that they're going to be restocking next year. And I think they've done this recently with some other models that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. So if you miss it, you can get it again next year. And if you miss it next year, you can probably get it again in 3 or 4 years when they bring it back again. And I'll talk about Air Max Day a little bit later too, but it was interesting that they did not make this an Air Max Day sneaker. There was an A Ma Maniere pack that released as well too. There was a Jordan 3, an Air Force 1, and an Air Max 95 as well too. And the Jordan 3 is nice. It's a departure from their usual palette with a white and blue, and it was actually in men's sizes this time. And I was saying on Twitter, they probably don't need to do these new domain releases and put the site on password protect mode, especially if the hype is not there. Like, why make your customers jump through a bunch of unnecessary hoops if you yourself know that the hype is not there like it was on previous drops? And whatever metrics they use, whatever KPIs they use to measure that kind of stuff, if it's email signups, likes on a post, or whatever it is, they know that the hype wasn't there compared to other ones. There was barely any chatter about this release, really. There was more chatter about the Brick 4s, of course, and the Jordan 4 SB Navy as well, too. And really, I don't know how James Whitner hypnotizes Nike and Jordan into letting him drop so many pairs and so many collections. He's allegedly going to have a big collection with Adidas this year too, or maybe next year. And maybe he hypnotized the DA to drop all the charges. Maybe he's like Dr. Claw when Dr. Claw hypnotized Inspector Gadget with the phrase "going my way." It always scarred me as a kid, and that's how I learned about hypnotism. That's my dated reference for the day, Dr. Claw hypnotizing Inspector Gadget. I mean, that was actually like MK Ultra Mind Control in a cartoon in the 80s or whatever it was. But in the last segment, I'll talk a little bit more about this, about how do you get that hype back? How do you stay relevant? How do you not get stale? And what can James Whitner and the Whitaker Group do to alleviate that? Is it as simple as just make fewer pairs? New Balance had an announcement for their spring collection. These are the designed by Teddy Santis, made in the USA. There's like a 990 V6, 990 V1, V2, a whole bunch of 990s, and some 992s as well since they're back this year. And there was a post by Jordan Kaiser, friend of the show, Jordan Kaiser, photographer extraordinaire. And he pointed out that the beige 992 that's coming out in this spring collection looks an awful lot like the 992 Packer that released like 4 or 5 years ago. And this was a beige-ish Packer shoe with, white accents. And I tweeted that this is proof that the Kith versus Packer feud lives on. And so I'm just here to explain that a little bit more if you're not aware of what I was talking about. So apparently from their time in New York as being rival boutiques or so, Kith and Packer allegedly do not like each other. They're like each other's nemesis. And I don't think it's like a hatred or anything. It's probably just a friendly rivalry, I guess. But Packer used to do a whole bunch of New Balances, but as soon as Teddy Santis moved over to New Balance to become their creative director or whatever his role is, the New Balance Packer releases stopped. And this could be a coincidence, that could just been the end of their contract, or it's because Teddy Santis is aligned with Ronnie Feig, and Team Kith does not like Team Packer. And obviously, Kith has kind of eclipsed Packer when it comes to number of stores and releases and collabs and things like that. But when I saw this new Spring 992 beige that looks an awful lot like the down market version of the 992 Packer collab, I figured the feud sort of lives on. So on to some recent sneaker news. Zadeh Kicks pleads guilty to $80 million wire fraud and bank fraud conspiracy. And this was basically admitting to the Ponzi scheme, but they can't exactly call it a Ponzi scheme. So if you click like the links that the district attorney put out and even Nice Kicks put out, they're not going to use the word Ponzi in there because there's a specific legal definition for the word Ponzi scheme, but it's a Ponzi scheme. And as I said in the intro, I was the one who called it a Ponzi scheme before, and everything they're describing in the court documents and in this settlement is a Ponzi scheme. Basically, he was taking as many orders as he could to the point where he couldn't fulfill them anymore, but he still wanted to keep the scheme up. So he went to a bunch of banks, like 15 banks, got a bunch of loans and lied on those loans, making false documentation. And that's what they got him for. Nothing related to counterfeits, which is under the purview of Homeland Security. And in the Oregon DA's press release about it, they did say in their investigation that they had help from the FBI and the CIA and Homeland Security. But there was nothing in this guilty plea related to counterfeits. It was all the wire fraud and the bank fraud. And the case had proceeded, and somewhere along in January is when the plea was changed to guilty. So let's enter the podcast legal speculation zone here again. When I publicly say on a podcast that I'm going to enter the podcast legal speculation zone, that's where I can kind of speculate on what could have happened. You can just do it and not get in trouble. So again, there was nothing in the guilty plea related to counterfeits. But Homeland Security, which investigates counterfeits, was a part of the investigation. So either they investigated and they found nothing, or maybe, let's say, again, podcast legal speculation zone, if someone in a case were to have information that the government needed for other federal cases, like in the case of, say, counterfeiters, or say like in the case of Chinese money launderers, and you give that government that information, and then in exchange, charges are either dropped or the scope of the charges that you're charged with are narrowed, allegedly. I'm not saying he snitched. I'm saying he could have snitched. But again, it's not exactly possible to know this kind of stuff when you do have a guilty plea. So I'm exiting the podcast legal speculation zone. I'll go back to stating the facts of what was in there. And the recommended sentence to Zadeh is 4.5 to 7 years. And his wife, who's also pleading guilty in this whole thing, is 1.5 years. So that's a big number. It probably will be in that range of like 5 years or so, according to one person in the legal realm that I talked to related to this. And as part of the sentence, Zadeh Kicks and his wife have agreed to pay back the victims in full. And my opinion, we'll see about that. I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, PayPal didn't really pay anyone back. PayPal was supposed to be this insurance against this kind of stuff, but no, they said screw it, screw these resellers because we can treat sneakerheads like shit. And I'm assuming Zadeh Kicks in the DA's office is probably going to do the same when it comes to paying everyone back in full. Maybe partial, but in full. But hey, this guy is spending 5 years in jail. That's at least some justice. There was a Nike earnings report that came out that had a lot of numbers going down, and my disclaimer is that I'm not a Wall Street analyst, but overall, the revenue was down, the in-store traffic was down, app downloads were down according to routers as well too. Overall, the wholesale approach was down, and I think there was some knowledge that there would be some pain before Elliot Hill, the new CEO, could like implement his new strategies. And so I'm assuming that's what will be going forward. I guess we'll see in the next earnings report. And according to a Nike shareholder lawsuit against the company as well too, is that they were just too aggressive with their direct-to-consumer DTC approach. And Nike shareholders are suing because they allege that Nike falsely claimed that the DTC strategy was like thriving and going well. And this is in a report by the Oregonian's Matthew Kish, friend of the show, Matthew Kish, where the shareholders basically call it a ticking time bomb, this DTC strategy. And overall, I don't think this DTC strategy is a failure long term. They were probably just way too aggressive with it, especially with how they treated Foot Locker and other big stores. And overall, as I said in a previous episode, John Donahue, the former CEO, is the one who's going to be blamed for the direct-to-consumer approach, but he was put in place by the Nike Board of Governors for this DTC approach. And so it's Phil Knight and Mark Parker and everyone else on the Board of Governors who chose the outsider eBay guy who was a former McKinsey consultant to come in there and do DTC. And that's what he was there for, and he was very aggressive on it. And how they went about it did not work, but as I said in my Future of Sneaker Retail episode, that it's unavoidable. There was another report by Matthew Kish in the Oregonian as well too about a sexual harassment lawsuit against Nike that was unsealed, and there were some unpleasant details in those articles involving Tinker Hatfield, where Tinker and another executive were called, quote, known philanderers with lower level employees whom they exert influence and power over, end quote. And there's an anecdote in there as well too where he was meeting a personal trainer that he was late for, and he said something like, if you dress sexier, I'd be on time. But that was the tamer stuff. There was another comment in there about someone saying that they walked in on him with a lower level employee in a sexual act. And again, this is all allegedly. This is all just what the unsealed lawsuit said that was reported by Matthew Kish. Either it'll be vetted or thrown out as part of the legal process of whatever that type of case is. But I didn't really see any chatter about this. I saw Lois Sakani, friend of the show, Lois Sakani of the Snobbat newsletter, write about this, but really no one else on Twitter I saw talking about it. But sometimes those engagement farming type of accounts will pick up a story like this, any kind of salacious story, and put it out there, but even they ignored it or they didn't even see it at all. But when it's like the end of April and it's Tinker Hatfield's birthday, then it's going to be happy birthday Tinker Hatfield. Those tweets are already scheduled. And that's because sneakerheads love Tinker Hatfield. They don't want to hear anything bad about the guy who designed their favorite silhouettes. And there's been some allegations made about Tinker Hatfield in the past as well too, especially with former employee Trevor Edwards that used to work at Nike. But you know, it doesn't really stick. It's because Tinker is beloved. He could show up at, say, SneakerCon or something and offer to sign Air Maxes, and the line would be hours and hours long. So that's what people want from Tinker Hatfield. They want to celebrate him. They want to celebrate the good memories that they have of him designing their favorite silhouettes, and not about any alleged allegations in lawsuits. That leads me to the next segment of what happened to Nike's Air Max Day? Is it because Tinker has a weird case? Like 10 years ago, they came up with Air Max Day and they brought back specific sneakers for Air Max Day labeled as Air Max Day. And then, of course, the Sean Wotherspoon as well, too, and other drops. And then it became Air Max Week and Air Max Month. And this year, they did not even use the term Air Max Day. And so I said on Twitter, if Nike doesn't care, why should I care? But to qualify that, yes, Nike still does like Air Max specific events and releases. They had this Donkey Kong inspired Air Max 1. They had events related to the DN8 sneaker in LA and Atlanta and other places, but none of them were branded as Air Max Day. The DN8 release, none of the posters or anything at the events had Air Max Day on it. The Donkey Kong Air Max 1, that was more related to Dot Swoosh. So there's definitely been a marketing shift away from it. And I'm sure if you like ask an influencer or someone who is invited to these events, they'll disagree with this point that, hey, I was invited to these events and it was all about Air Max. And as it happens about semantics, it's easy to argue about semantics. And people are free to share their opinion that no, Nike does really care about the Air Max. And what does it matter if it doesn't say Air Max Day on it? And this DN8 sneaker is super fire because I got one for free. You know, all those opinions are fine to have if you have them. But purely speaking, in the world of, say, marketing and promotion, if you come up with a promotion that is memorable and customers go out of their way to celebrate, why would you just give that up? Why would you just kind of like, we're not going to do that? You know how hard it is to come up with something like that the community like takes as their own? I mean, like Toyota still does Toyotathon, and that is kind of a reminder that this is just like a corporate holiday. But I've already done the corporation, the boss is not your friend take on this podcast. But, I was just curious about why Nike is moving away from it. And because they still spend a lot on demand creation, as he said it, the quarterly earnings report that came out, they spent 1.1 billion and it said it was up 8%. So I was curious why. Why would they shift away from an Air Max Day branded day or week or whatever when it's clearly something they got over that the community likes and celebrates? So, reasons could be they wasn't converting to sales. Like if you do all these marketing and campaigns and those shoes were not selling out, then why keep doing it? Or maybe it's because Air Max Day kind of celebrates older franchises like the Air Max 1 and Air Max 90. And those are kind of retro lines. And they want to push the new silhouettes like DN8 and everything. And, the goal is always to get the next big GR hit. So why spend marketing money on old franchises when you got to put money into getting the DN8 over? But at the same time, that sneaker was from the previous regime. And that maybe the new regime does not like it as much, but you can't just dump the project and like not even like promote it. Then it's going to be a bomb for sure. So maybe that's why they have these half measures for this DN8 sneaker. I don't know. I'm not in those rooms. I'm just speculating on a podcast. But like, as I was saying, the community still celebrates Air Max Day, Air Max Month. People are doing hashtags and posting photos. And I've done that before as well too. I didn't do it this time, but it's fun to do. It's a community thing. So Nike could just hand it over to the community. Hey, we are done with Air Max Day. It's yours. But even that's not going to be a formal process. Phil Knight's not going to meet like the sneaker mayor in a park and shake hands and be like, we've now bestowed Air Max Day upon you, sneaker mayor. You take it over from here. So maybe it's already happened. Maybe the community has already taken it over. Or maybe Nike was like, we don't like that the community has taken this over, that they kind of dictate that we have to vote back a sneaker or we have to give them exactly what they want. We want to do what we want. And this year, we don't want to do it. Maybe in the future, we'll decide that we want to bring it back. We dictate the terms. StockX announced a verified seller program where a select group of sellers, the bigger bulk sellers that meet a certain set of criteria and have been vetted, those sellers are then able to directly ship to the buyer. Because they've been vetted and therefore trusted, it's assumed that their pairs are all authentic. And so those sellers can ship directly to the buyer and even put the StockX tag themselves on those sneakers. And the benefit to the buyer, of course, is that they get their pair faster. And GOAT already has a program like this, and GOAT doesn't really do big statements and get in the news as much as StockX does, but they just quietly do this kind of stuff. And StockX is different. StockX is perceived different among buyers and sellers. So with a program like this, what sellers would actually qualify? And of course, the retailers that are known to be backdooring, those stores I assume could qualify. I'm not sure if they have a different program already for those kind of stores. So let's just put that to the side. But the sellers that would qualify, these are like the bulk sellers that are beyond like level 4 or 5, whatever the limit is on their little grid. I don't know how they get their pairs. Maybe they are like a third party that does backdoors from other places or work directly with wholesale or whoever. I actually wonder, as part of the vetting process, do these verified sellers have to give up their sources? Do they have to say to StockX, I get my pairs from this warehouse? Or is it just that you are a seller that always ships on time, never has any issues with the sales, customers never complained, and you sell a shit ton of them? And that's probably what they're really looking for. And so they say they'll do background checks and training and regular audits. And how does training work? Is that going to be like some 24-year-old StockX authenticator walks into a warehouse of a big bulk reseller and start, giving them training on how to be a StockX verified seller? And even audits, like how would an audit work? Would there be a StockX strike team? Would they have like StockX badges? They would raid a warehouse like a food inspector, demanding to see on the spot, show me those panda ducks right now, and starts like sniffing them right there in the warehouse. Probably not. It's most likely like a secret shopper type of program if they are doing this kind of auditing, where someone is working for StockX and they're buying from these verified sellers. They're clicking the little rocket icon and buying those sneakers, and then maybe they do the actual authentication process. And then if they catch like these are fakes, then that seller is kicked out of the program. Again, this is all just me guessing. This is all me just saying how I would do it. And so if I thought of it, then I'm assuming StockX probably thought of it and probably thought about it a lot more, because I've only given it really like 10 minutes of thought here. But overall, I assume most of the auditing is done based on just like dashboard of reports that are generated on these sellers. There's some manager or some reviewer person who just logs into a site, checks a dashboard, and there it shows a bunch of TPS reports of all the verified sellers, how many of them ship on time, if any had any issues, if any of them came back where the customer complained that they smell of weed or whatever. And those are the ones that they look further into and audit. So my assumption is it's not a strike team and probably just a manager looking at a TPS report. And then the other worry is like when you're passing off authentication like this is, could it be gamed? And yeah, it can be gamed. It could be easily gamed if you want to. We talked about Zadeh Kicks. Would he qualify to be a verified seller? He was able to get a large number of sneakers. He was just buying them from eBay, and StockX themselves, he was probably their best customer in terms of buying. Would that disqualify him to being a bulk seller as well too? Well, according to StockX, if you buy from them, you should just sell the same shoe right back on their platform. So maybe he would qualify. But the biggest worry is like if someone is selling 100 pairs of, say, Panda Dunks or something, and they are just slipping in 10% of them are fakes and they're just kind of sliding them in, one for every 10 orders. Could this happen? Yes, this could happen. And it's probably already happening if someone is doing that and has like the desire to do that. Panda Dunks are probably not a good example because they're like under retail or whatever, but like A6 1130, like I mentioned earlier. And GOAT already has this verified seller program. So this scenario of 10% of the bulk sneakers that they have are fake could already be happening there too. So there has to be a value in these programs for these bulk sellers not to do this, not to like slip in a fake or two, because if you are kicked off these platforms, that is a large chunk of your sales because these platforms are popular. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it could happen. Any system really could be gamed. But most of these bulk sellers that do a ton of sales are probably selling mostly GRs and sneakers that aren't like overly faked. The other thing is for StockX side is if you are letting these trusted sellers do the authentication, then that also puts you an arm's length away from any potential lawsuits that could happen as well too. Because they can then say, hey, we're just a platform for buyers and sellers, which they are, and this is a program for trusted sellers. And if someone broke that trust, then that seller is the one you should be going after because they're the one who broke that trust. They broke the rules that they agreed to with us. So some of this could be a response to the lawsuit, or it could be just, we want to have A6 1130s available on the Walmart site, and there's a bunch of resellers that have a whole bunch of them. And to make it faster for that Walmart buyer or the person who clicks the rocket icon on the StockX app, they buy from them and they get it much faster. The other thing I joked about on Twitter was it's hilarious to see StockX finally doing some PR after like 10 years. Like they were founded in like 2015 and it's 10 years later now. And now they're like, hey, we care about the community. We care about your experience. And how come you didn't care the 10 years before? How come before when I said something's off with my sneaker, you guys said, tough luck, sell it on the fucking platform. So for 10 years, that's how they acted. And now they're like, hey, it's a new day at StockX. We are a new regime and we got a new CEO and changes are being made. And that's true. It seems like changes are being made. I saw on Twitter that Sneaker Fetish was flown out to Detroit by StockX and shown around and shown the VIP room and taken to a Pistons game and stuff. And I assume this is all part of the PR push to talk with people in the community and use them to get the word out that, it's a new regime and it's a new day at StockX, and Sneaker Fetish is out there getting flown out to say this, and I'm sitting here doing it for free, I guess. And even this whole verified seller program, like the day the press release went out, there was an article by Brendan Dunn in Complex detailing the whole program. And previously that was not happening for any announcement. So obviously they're working with people in the community and people like Brendan Dunn to get this kind of content out there, the press release out there. That's what I meant by PR. And they weren't doing this in the years before, it seemed, to this level at least. And even on Complex, the previous StockX CEO was on their Complex podcast at one point, and afterwards they kind of shitted on him in later episodes where they were calling him out for being evasive on questions. And so anytime there's a CEO change, just like we saw with Nike, is you can just blame the last guy. We are different. But really that is an indictment on the previous regime. And as I said in my last episode, that entire Nike lawsuit with the 47 fakes that one guy got could have been avoided if they just responded to his customer service request to get a refund or whatever on those ones. Instead, they kind of delayed it to the point where he had to post on Instagram, and that's when Nike found it. But back then, it was the CEO or the executives and everyone else on the board that decided that this is the kind of company we're going to be and how we're going to operate. So the result is they get what they got. They got a lawsuit and they got their hand slapped, and it's still in the courts for the rest of it. But that's the old regime. And so the new regime, the new CEO, Greg Schwartz, I think his name is. I've just been saying new CEO. It seems like they are making actual improvements, especially in customer support. And they kind of have to if they're going to do this verified seller program and start selling directly on Walmart.com and stuff like that. And, I say that you can't have this verified seller program without giving good customer service. But, maybe I'm wrong because GOAT already has this kind of program. And I don't think their customer service has improved. But overall, I'm not disappointed with these changes. These changes needed to be made, and they needed to take these steps to gain the trust of their customers again, to gain the trust of sellers as well too. And as I've said before in the business podcast episodes of this show, is that trust is the most important value you can have as a business. So they got to go out there and regain that trust. And it just happens that they're doing it in year 10 of their existence. And it just shows that it's never too late. Bodega store, the Bodega boutique, has closed their store in Boston and is basically on the verge of closing, even though they're trying to regroup and reopen soon. And this was detailed in an article in Sneaker Freaker with one of the co-founders, Jay Gordon. And a couple of weeks ago, they had another article about co-founder Dan Natola departing the brand. And so things have been going bad there. They closed the Boston location, and that happened in like January. And I didn't really even see anyone mention it or talk about it. And so that's, I guess, how far Bodega had fallen. And so the online store right now is closed, and they've kind of relocated to an LA location, which I think is still closed, but is supposed to reopen. But apparently it's just one of the co-owners, Jay Gordon, by himself there with some like new employees who are probably just like minimum wage employees, I'm guessing. And everyone else was fired. All the other location staff was fired, and the office staff was apparently fired or let go if there was a severance and things like that. I'm not sure. So this article by Sneaker Freaker, by the editor-in-chief there, Woody, it's kind of like this generous puff piece on the whole thing. It's like, oh, you guys have been through a lot of tough challenges. What's going on there? I even like take shots about like greedy landlords and things like that. Meanwhile, the guy who's being interviewed, Jay Gordon, he's like, no, we made a lot of mistakes, and he's trying to like own up to it. So it seems like the goal of this thing was to kind of, let's reset and let's try to get back on our feet. Even though it seems like they made a lot of mistakes that were like of their own doing. So the article says that in 2021, they actually had one of their best years ever. And then in 2022, they started having fulfillment issues, both internally and with third-party logistics. And then some of the other external issues that were blamed were like things like the loss of Yeezy, and then also higher rent costs. But the guy, Jay Gordon, also blamed higher payroll, but he also blames their leadership. He says they didn't pivot quickly enough, and then started borrowing money and then got into a big hole. And then once you're in a big hole, it's hard to dig yourself out. You dig up, stupid. It's hard to do, especially in this economy as well, too. So the article says that he was planning to shut down the entire business but then kind of got a reprieve from Nike saying they would kind of find a way to support them and help them get back on their feet. And what could that mean? That could mean like, hey, if you owe us money, if you had 90 days to pay us, now we're going to extend that a bit. Or say you had product that didn't sell, we'll take it back and you can return it to us. So there's a lot of ways it can go. And then the article did say that other brands and stuff that they're partnered with are also willing to help out. But I mentioned the fulfillment issues. It's like they had 1,600 orders apparently that the fulfillment company that they were paying, the third-party logistics fulfillment company that does all the shipping for them, did not send out those orders. And this is not really to blame on the fulfillment company, because if you're not getting paid from the boutique that you're hired to, why would you send those orders? You wouldn't just send them out, then you're never going to get paid. And on Twitter, there was some discussion about, this is also a sign of the times, that this shows that stuff sitting is not exactly good for boutiques. And that is, a take that is fine to have, I think. That's kind of adjacent to the economy and the world of boutiques. I don't disagree with that at all. But like in this case, they had 1,600 orders from actual customers and they could not fulfill them. And I don't blame the third-party logistics company. The blame is on Bodega for not paying the bill. So if you screw over actual customers, then why would they come back to you for an item that they could probably get somewhere else? The customer's not to blame for that. Third-party logistics is not to blame for that. Bodega is to blame for that. The ownership is to blame for that. And in the community, in the last year or so, they've been known for bad business and how bad their customer support has been. Someone I was talking to once said that, they accidentally ordered a size small in a clothing and they wanted a medium and they wouldn't even change it. They just shipped him the small. And I remember a story recently with Chef Doomy on Twitter where he had a discount code and they wouldn't apply it and things like that. It's just like, if the screws are being tightened, if they got to tighten their belt, I could see where customer service takes a hit. You can't exactly provide good customer service if you can't afford to pay the bills. So they're looking to rebound, they're looking to restart, they're looking to clear their debts, I assume, and get back on their feet and do the fulfillment themselves. He said he's kind of got a skeleton crew in LA. Like I said, I'm guessing it's just minimum wage warehouse employees and this one guy, and that's the fulfillment. But really, it's like, should they come back? I know they have this huge heritage of the last 20 plus years of being a store, and they have so many sneaker collabs over the years from almost every single footwear brand, from Nike, Adidas, Reebok, Hoka, Saucony, Asics, Vans probably. I think I can't even remember one, but I'm sure there is one. So if you have that heritage and you have the people that designed that, should you come back? Or are you just barely holding on to that because you're the owner? And Soul Retriever actually posted a good article on this. And their take was if you let go of everyone that made you who you are, then really who are you? If all the people that designed all those Asics Gel Keanu 20 and everything are all fired, should you be able to come back and start doing new ones? And part of the blame here is who really is Bodega, and do they have a real following? Do they have fans? And if they've spent the last couple of years just doing bad business, it doesn't seem like they do. If no one really noticed that they've been closed since January, not a single post on Twitter that I saw. And I follow over 3,000 people, mostly sneaker people. Not a single mention did I see. So if they've done nothing to nurture and cultivate a following, to have customers follow the brand, to respect the brand, to do good business, to have a name and face out there, I didn't even know the names of these co-founders before I read these articles. It's because they came up in the age where those are in the background. But now when you want to start pressing a reset and garnering some sympathy with a puff piece, then you got to put your name out there. But maybe they shouldn't stick around. Maybe if they're just firing employees and hiring new scab employees and aren't paying their debts, aren't shipping, and aren't doing anything to cultivate a following, and now after 20 years looking to garner some sympathy, maybe all the opportunities and stock allocations and collabs that they got over the years, maybe that should go to someone else. Maybe it should go to someone new, someone refreshing, someone with a name and face that's out there that you know, that can see and root for, someone who does good business. Maybe it should go to them, and the bodega is closed. So I mentioned it with Bodega there, that you have to nurture and cultivate a following. And of course, this is a generic statement on purpose because it's up to you to nurture and cultivate a following based on your persona, your industry, the time that we're in, the age that we're in, the prices that people can afford. A Ma Maniere, I'm going to use them as an example. James Whitner, of course, is a known figure of that brand or the collection of brands under his Whitaker group. So why haven't his recent releases hit? It can't be because he gets to work on subpar models and silhouettes. I mean, he's got like the cream of the crop with the Jordan 3, Air Force One, and the Air Max 95. So the sum of the reason, I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've thought it already. There's just too many releases. There's too many collections. They're too expensive. It's too repetitive. It's the same color palette over and over again. And even the stories, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say stories, but I'm just saying it's a lot of similar or adjacent stories. Or could it be because of James Whitner himself? Is there something off-putting about him, about having a case? And did some people lose respect for him? I'm sure they did. You know, when I hear him talk on the interviews and stuff that he's done, it comes across to me that he primarily cares about two things: his people and his money. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like how he does it, of course. But overall, I don't think it's played a huge part. You know, there's still a lot of people that like him. There's a lot of people that root for him. He wasn't canceled or anything. Even Nike didn't cancel him. But there is something slightly off-putting to some. So the answer really is it's a little bit of all of the above. There's too many of them. They're too expensive. They're too similar. And then you sprinkle in James Whitner backdooring to China on top of it all, and all of it can be summarized by the word fatigue. People are just kind of tired of your releases. So how do you fix this? It's just undoing and unspooling everything I just said. Don't do too many drops. Don't make them expensive. Don't do the same color palette. Try telling different stories. But if you have the power to hypnotize Nike and Jordan brand, and apparently Adidas as well, to give you anything you want, then who would say no to that? I don't think any brand would. So he's in this situation where he can get whatever he asks for, and the brands will give it to him, and he can make money off it, but eventually that well is going to run dry. It's going to get too repetitive. So for other brands out there, you know, you're not going to be as charming as James Whitner. You're not going to become a hypnotist like Ravine the hypnotist extraordinaire. That's my second dated reference, as he's a famous Canadian hypnotist from the 80s, Ravine. But really, I gave this formula a long time ago on a past episode. I basically said you have to try new things. You have to keep refreshing things. You can't go stale. You have to show growth. You have to try new things. And you have to bring people along on your journey and embrace the community. That, of course, doesn't mean you have to let people in and share every single detail that you do, but you have to have people that root for you. You have to cultivate and nurture a following, however that works for you. And obviously, James Whitner has done a lot of this, and that's why he is where he is. He has people rooting for him. He has cultivated a community, but he's gone stale. And I said this before too, but I think it's worth revisiting because I see it more and more in this day and age that to cultivate a following, you have to be a persona-based brand. You have to have your name and face out there and your personality out there. That is the only way to get people to root for you these days. The Gen X version of this was to create a brand, call it Bodega, have a concept, and people will root for the concept. And look at him now. The guy's looking for handouts, and he's working with like 4 Mexicans in a warehouse in LA now. So this is not new, of course. It's been a thing for a long time for a lot of brands, particularly in high fashion, where the top designer goes from like fashion house to fashion house. But what I'm saying is that it's just more important than ever. We're already seeing this, of course, with collaborators with Joe Freshgoods, JaeTips, Nigel Sylvester, Cortez with Clint 419. And for retail, it's a little bit harder because we're not exactly, as we're saying, a new boutiques popping up in this day and age. There's nothing really there to replace Bodega. And I kind of suspect that's why Nike is willing to help them out, because they need to have these, tier 0 type of accounts, whatever they call it, neighborhood accounts, to be in place for their marketing strategy. But eventually the pendulum will swing the other way. And, I don't know when that will be with this tariff stuff, but eventually it will be, and there will be new stores, and they'll have to have a name and a face behind that store. And based on that owner's or co-founder's personality, if they're independently owned, that is. Maybe they'll all just be owned by JD Sports, and this era is going to be truly over. But just look at UnheardOf brand as an example. And for this, I could also use JaeTips or John Geiger even. But for UnheardOf, look at how Phil Lipschultz, the owner of UnheardOf, has been able to cultivate a following over the last few releases, particularly. They've been around as a store for a while, but with these Adidas drops since like 2023, I think, he's been able to build on each one. And just as a disclaimer here, everything I'm saying is my opinion. I was not given a shoe. I was not invited to the event. Nothing. Not related to UnheardOf, Philip Lipschultz, or JaeTips, or John Geiger, them giving me a sneaker at all. So any of the comments that are here are just my own comments. But back to Philip Lipschultz and the UnheardOf releases, each sneaker that he does has been able to build on each one. And he has told his story. They're very personal stories about his sister and his grandma and being an orphan. Like, how much more detailed and personal can you get? But he's also introduced his pork chop pig character in the last two releases. So he's tried new things and he's shown growth and he's not getting stale. And he's brought people along into the fold, telling his stories out there at these events, flying people out, both smaller creators and larger content creators. And so those people are all like rooting for him. They're on his side. So when you do that, you cultivate a following, you're building an army. They'll be out there. And as I said in the Tribalism podcast, it's kind of a stan culture we're in right now. And brands are taking advantage of it. Music labels especially. Half those stan accounts out there are probably like owned by music labels. And sneaker brands and stores, only kind of dip their toe in there. So I'm not saying they should abuse this. I talked a lot about abuse of tribalism in previous episodes. I'm saying they could use it responsibly to sell out their products and make money. Because the point of a business is to create and maintain a customer. So you can have an exciting sneaker and you might create a customer, but what are you going to do to maintain it? What are you going to do to stay relevant? Look at Joe Freshgoods and his recent 992 release. He straight up called them aged well, that these sneakers have aged well, that the shoes look good, that the product is good, that he's shown growth, he's shown creativity, he's embraced the community as well. Compare that to Sean Wotherspoon. I don't mean to pick on Sean Wotherspoon, but that's a good example where you can have a fire product, a hit sneaker, a sneaker of the year type of sneaker, and he even had a community and everything, but slowly and surely, it is kind of diminished to the point where he is now. I don't know what he's up to these days. I'm sure he is fine, and I'm sure he's doing well. I'm just comparing his first sneaker to his releases now and the concept of aging well. I'm not saying you have to be Joe Freshgoods because that bar is high. I'm saying you got to be you. You have to have your persona out there. You have to have your personality out there for people to root for you. Then on the other side, if something like bad happens, let's say the release is botched, as the UnheardOf one had some issues with it, it's kind of expected that UnheardOf will make it right. So that's the thing where you have to give the people what they want. The army has to be fed. Real people will be rewarded. That is the expectation. And so if you are the type of personality that does not care about that, this type of business plan that I'm outlining here is not going to work for you. But, a fast sellout is not particularly a bad thing. Yes, it'll make some fans angry and you might have to go out there and tell the story about what happened and what you can do. And if you can't do anything, kind of apologize or whatever. But a sellout, it builds lore for your brand. It becomes marketing to say 1,000 sneakers sold out instantly. It gives you a chance to reward those fans the next time because now you've kind of shown a big step that there might be a next time, because that is also not ever guaranteed. And when you build fans, when you have the stan army, they might go out there and say this Piggy runner is the sneaker of the year. And other people who are not in the army, who do not get it, will be like, what? What are you saying? It's just a pink shoe. I think it kind of sucks, actually. And you might hear some pushback from the UnheardOf army in this example. Because you're not saying the sneaker sucks. You're saying UnheardOf sucks. You're saying Philip Lipschultz sucks. How dare you say that? He's a nice guy. And the same goes for JaeTips or John Geiger. Try criticizing JaeTips or John Geiger, and you'll hear from people. You'll hear from his fans. So that's the kind of model for a business that I see happening in sneakers going forward. But it only works if you have the right personality fit for it. If you're just a quiet guy in the back room, you're going to have to come up with something else. I don't have the answers for you, but I'm going to use some of these tips myself. As commander of the SOC Army, I have a special announcement to make. This is kind of the most important announcement you'll hear in any sneaker podcast that you listen to this week. So it's very important that each and every one of you listen very closely. Go fuck yourself.